Kendrick was 37 years old, made $59,000 a year installing and servicing commercial HVAC systems across Pensacola, and on the first Friday of October, he learned his marriage was a lie. He knew it with the kind of sickening certainty that settles not in the mind, but deep in the gut, a cold, heavy stone of truth. He sat in his 2014 Ford F-150, a truck with 187,000 miles on it, and the lingering scent of refrigerant and sweat baked into the upholstery, parked across the street from the Crown Plaza Hotel downtown. The rain, a miserable Florida drizzle, slicked the asphalt and blurred the street lights into hazy coronas. It was 6:47 p.m. He watched as a silver Lexus RX 350, a $52,000 monument to his wife Tessa's ambition, pulled smoothly into the valet lane. The driver's side door opened, and a man in a crisp, dark suit, probably a $3,000 Canali, the kind Tessa pointed out in magazines, stepped out. He handed the keys to the valet. Then, the passenger door opened. Tessa emerged, a vision in a cream-colored trench coat he'd never seen before, one that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment of $1,450. She laughed, a sound he couldn't hear through the glass and the rain but could perfectly imagine, a bright, tinkling sound reserved for clients and important people. The man put a hand on the small of her back, a gesture of casual, confident ownership. They walked through the gleaming glass doors of the hotel and disappeared. Kendrick raised his phone, the screen of his 3-year-old Samsung Galaxy illuminating his face. His deep brown skin, usually warm and open, was drawn tight over his cheekbones, his expression utterly still. He zoomed in, the lens struggling in the low light, and took a picture. It was blurry, indistinct, but he knew what it was. It was proof. Proof that her late Friday shift at the design firm was a fiction she had carefully constructed. Proof that her exhaustion, her pleas for space, her new, expensive tastes were all part of a world he was not invited into. He was just the man who paid the bills, who fixed the leaky faucet, whose calloused hands were a source of faint, unspoken embarrassment to her. The stone in his gut grew heavier, colder. This was the first Friday. He had no idea then that there would be 3 more just like it, each one chipping away at the man he was, reforging him into someone new, someone patient and methodical and cold. Have you ever felt a truth so painful you couldn't even let yourself think it? That was Kendrick's world now, a place of silent observation where every smile from his wife felt like a fresh betrayal. We'll follow him through this quiet nightmare, but stick with us, because the man who emerges on the other side is not the one you see right now, broken in a beat-up truck. Their life, from the outside, was the picture of hard-won stability. They lived in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house in the Brent neighborhood of Pensacola, a home Kendrick had put a 20% down payment on, with money he'd saved for a decade before he even met her. The house was worth about $220,000 now, and his name was the only one on the original deed, a detail his father, a retired master plumber, had insisted on. "A man's foundation is his own," his father had said. Kendrick hadn't understood the gravity of those words until now. Their evenings had a rhythm. He would get home around 5:30 p.m., smelling of machine oil and the Florida heat. He'd strip off his worn $120 Red Wing boots on the back porch and leave his work clothes in the laundry room. Tessa would usually be in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, a glass of $30 Sauvignon Blanc in her hand. The kitchen was her domain, a recent renovation that had cost them $18,000, a sum that had made Kendrick's stomach clench. It featured gleaming white quartz countertops, a gas range she insisted was essential for proper cooking, and a wine fridge that held more value than the tools in his truck. "Rough day, honey?" she'd ask, her eyes not leaving the screen of her $2,200 iPhone. "The usual," Kendrick would reply, his voice warm and steady. Compressor went out on the big unit at the university. It was a beast. He'd wash his hands at the sink, the rough, calloused skin a map of his labor. He was a good man, a strong black man with kind eyes and a quiet pride in his work. He could diagnose a failing capacitor by sound alone and could haul a 70-pound air handler up a ladder without breaking a sweat. His skill paid their bills. She would hum in acknowledgement, her attention on an image of a minimalist living room. This designer from Copenhagen is doing incredible things with negative space. He would look around their own living room, at the comfortable but worn $2,800 sectional sofa they'd bought together, at the framed photos on the wall of their wedding day, of trips to Biloxi, of family gatherings. It wasn't minimalist. It was lived in. It was theirs. Or so he thought. The financial details were a quiet source of friction. His $59,000 a year was steady, reliable. Her income as a junior designer was commission-based and fluctuated wildly, but she carried herself as if she were a senior partner. She'd come home with a new pair of shoes, $800 Jimmy Choos, and wave it off. It's an investment, Kenny. You have to look the part. He'd look at his own collection of shoes, the work boots, a pair of running sneakers, and some worn leather dress shoes for church, and just nod. He paid the mortgage, the utilities, the car insurance, and the grocery bills from his account. Her money, she said, was for building her brand. That brand seemed to consist of expensive lunches, a wardrobe that was becoming increasingly foreign to him, and her silver Lexus, for which the $650 monthly payment was a constant strain. He drove his F-150, paid off 5 years ago. It was practical. It was his. He remembered one Saturday afternoon a few months back. The garbage disposal was jammed. He was under the sink, his broad shoulders barely fitting in the cramped cabinet, the smell of stale water and metal filling the air. He had the whole thing disassembled on a towel on the floor. Tessa walked in with two of her friends from the design firm, women with sharp haircuts and architectural jewelry. "What's going on under there?" one of them asked, laughing. Tessa sighed, a theatrical, long-suffering sound. "Oh, you know, Kendrick and his projects. He can fix anything with his hands. It's so quaint." The word hung in the air, quaint, like he was a charming relic, a blacksmith in a world of 3D printers. He felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He said nothing. He just found the obstruction, a small olive pit, reassembled the disposal, and tested it. The familiar whir filled the kitchen. He slid out from under the sink, wiping his hands on a rag. Her friends were already talking about a gallery opening. They didn't even notice he had fixed the problem. He just stood there, a ghost in his own home, smelling of plumbing and quiet resentment. That was their facade, a successful designer and her handy, quaint husband. He was the foundation, solid and unseen, while she was the gleaming, expensive structure built on top of him. And he was beginning to realize the foundation was cracking. The betrayals hadn't started with the hotel. They had been smaller, a series of paper cuts to the heart of their marriage, each one explained away so smoothly he felt foolish for even noticing. The accumulation of these moments was a weight he carried long before he parked his truck outside the Crown Plaza. The rule about Fridays began about 6 months ago. It was a Thursday night, and he was rubbing her feet as they watched some reality show about selling luxury real estate. Her feet were always sore, she said, from walking around in her expensive heels all day. "Kenny," she said, her tone serious, "we need to talk about my Fridays." He squeezed her arch gently. "What about them?" "My boss is putting me on a huge new commercial project, a hotel lobby downtown. It's a major opportunity for me, but it means I'm going to be working really late on Fridays, like 8 or 9 p.m. late. It's going to be my big push day to get everything ready for the weekend clients." "Wow, babe, that's great," he said, genuinely happy for her. "Whatever you need. I can have dinner waiting for you." She pulled her foot away. "No, that's the thing. I don't want you to wait up. I'll be so drained, so focused on work. I just need that time to be mine. No calls, no texts asking when I'll be home. Friday is my day to just crush it at work. It's my career. You get that, right?" He felt a small, prickling sense of unease. "So, I just shouldn't talk to you all evening?" "It's not like that," she said, her voice taking on a slightly condescending edge. "It's about respecting my professional space. It's what partners do. They support each other's ambitions. So from now on, Friday is mine. Don't follow me, don't check up on me, just trust me." The phrase "don't follow me" struck him as odd, overly dramatic. Why would he follow her? But he loved her, and he wanted to be supportive. So he agreed. "Okay, Tessa, I get it. Friday is yours." He had no idea how wrong he was, or how those exact words would echo in his mind later, tasting like poison. Then came the financial discoveries. He handled their main budget, and he noticed a charge on their joint credit card, the one they used for household expenses, for $280 at a restaurant called the Grand Mariner. He'd never heard of it. He looked it up. It was a high-end seafood place on the bay, famous for its sunset views and $1,000 wine list. He brought it up casually that weekend. "Hey, I saw a charge for the Grand Mariner. Did you take a client there?" She didn't even look up from her laptop. "Oh yeah, that was with the hotel developers. Had to wine and dine them. It's part of the job, Kenny." $280 seems like a lot for a work dinner, he said, trying to keep his tone light. She finally looked at him, her eyes cold. "Do you know how much this contract is worth? A tiny fraction of that. Do you want me to succeed or not? Because sometimes it feels like you're trying to nickel and dime my career to death." He backed down immediately. "No, of course not. I was just asking." He felt small and cheap, like he didn't understand her sophisticated world. He never questioned her expenses again. He simply started paying closer attention. He saw more charges, for lunches at expensive cafes, for clothes from boutiques he'd never heard of. It was a slow bleed, a steady siphoning of their shared resources into her separate life. The most painful betrayals were the personal ones, the little moments of public humiliation. They were at a barbecue at her boss's house, a sprawling waterfront property in a gated community. Kendrick, in his best polo shirt and clean jeans, felt out of place among the architects and designers in their linen shirts and loafers that cost more than his monthly truck payment would have been. He was talking to another husband, a real estate lawyer, about fishing. It was a comfortable, easy conversation. Tessa walked over, a champagne flute in her hand, and draped an arm over his shoulder. "I see you found my wonderful Kendrick," she said to the lawyer, her voice dripping with a strange, sweet condescension. "He's my rock, so practical. I swear, if the world ended, he'd be able to build us a shelter out of scrap metal and pure stubbornness." She meant it as a compliment, he thought, but it landed like an insult. It defined him as a simple creature of labor, a beast of burden, while she and her friends were the architects of the beautiful world. The lawyer gave a tight, polite smile and quickly excused himself. Tessa didn't seem to notice. She just squeezed his shoulder. "Don't be shy, honey, mingle." He spent the rest of the party standing by the grill talking to the caterers. He felt more at home with them. He watched his wife across the perfectly manicured lawn, laughing and networking, a radiant star in a galaxy he could see but never enter. He realized then that she wasn't just living a separate life on Fridays. She was living a separate life right in front of him, every single day. He was just the convenient, reliable, quaint husband who made it all possible. The weight of that realization was crushing. The first Friday of the surveillance was born from a simple, unavoidable fact. A co-worker at the HVAC depot had his hours cut, and Kendrick, feeling generous, offered to cover his Friday afternoon emergency call-out shift. It meant he wouldn't get home until 7 p.m. He sent Tessa a text at 4 p.m. to let her know, "Hey, covering for Mike, won't be home till after 7. Her reply came back instantly. "Okay, remember what we talked about. Friday is my late night. Don't worry about me." He didn't think much of it until he finished his job. A simple thermostat replacement in a dental office, an hour early. It was 6:15 p.m. He was driving home down Palafox Street when he saw it. Tessa's silver Lexus, parked outside a boutique he knew she loved. He smiled, thinking he'd surprise her. Maybe they could grab a quick bite after all. He pulled into a parking spot a block away and started walking. But as he got closer, he saw she wasn't alone. She was walking out of the store with a man, tall and silver-haired, impeccably dressed. They were laughing. The man opened the passenger door of her Lexus for her. It was a gesture of old-fashioned chivalry that felt strangely intimate. Kendrick stopped in his tracks, his heart starting to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He watched as the man got into the driver's seat of her car and pulled out into traffic. Kendrick's mind raced. A client? Her boss? Why was he driving her car? An instinct he didn't know he possessed took over. He ran back to his truck, started the engine with a roar, and pulled out, keeping a safe distance. He followed them through the streets of downtown Pensacola, his mind a blank slate of confusion and dread. They didn't go to her office building. They went to the Crown Plaza. And that's when he parked across the street, the drizzle starting to fall, and watched the scene unfold at 6:47 p.m. The valet, the hand on her back, the disappearing act into the lobby. The discovery wasn't a single moment. It was a slow-motion car crash of the soul. He sat in his truck for a full hour, the rain drumming on the roof, the engine cold. He didn't feel anger, not yet. He just felt a profound, hollowing emptiness. The woman he loved, the life he had built, it was all a stage play. And he had just stumbled backstage and seen the actors without their costumes. He finally drove home, his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The house was dark and quiet. He walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking at the photos. Everything looked different now, tainted. He went into their bedroom and opened her closet. It was a riot of color and texture, silks, cashmeres, linens. He saw the new cream-colored trench coat hanging there. He reached out and touched the sleeve. It was soft, expensive, and utterly alien. He saw the price tag still tucked inside. $150. He felt a wave of nausea. He backed out of the closet and closed the door. He spent the rest of the night on the worn sectional sofa in the living room, the one they'd picked out together. He didn't turn on the TV, he just sat in the dark, the blurry photo on his phone burning a hole in his consciousness. She came home at 9:43 p.m., humming to herself. She flipped on the light and her cheerful expression faltered when she saw him sitting there. "Kenny, you scared me. What are you doing sitting in the dark?" "Just thinking," he said, his voice raspy. "You look exhausted," she said, coming over and kissing the top of his head. Her lips were cold. She smelled faintly of wine and a perfume that wasn't hers, a musky, expensive scent. "Long day with that new project?" he asked, the words feeling like shards of glass in his mouth. "The absolute worst," she sighed, kicking off her $800 heels. "These developers are impossible. But I think I made a breakthrough." She was a brilliant liar, effortless. He looked at her face, the face he had loved for 7 years, and saw a complete stranger. It was in that moment, sitting on their couch in the dark, that the plan began to form. It wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a plan for survival. He would not confront her. He would not scream or cry. He would gather evidence. He would be patient. He would be still. And then he he would be gone. The next 4 weeks were the hardest of Kendrick's life. He was an actor in the play of his own marriage, performing the role of the loving, unsuspecting husband, while his real self was a cold, calculating observer. Each day was a tightrope walk of feigned normalcy, and every lie she told was another piece of evidence he filed away in the locked box of his mind. On the second Friday, he was ready. He left work at his normal time, went home, and changed out of his work uniform into jeans and a dark hoodie. He ate a cold sandwich standing over the kitchen sink. Then he drove his F-150 back downtown and parked in a different spot, one with a clearer view of the Crown Plaza's entrance. At 6:46 p.m., 1 minute earlier than the week before, the silver Lexus pulled up. The same man, the same Tessa, the same confident hand on her back. He took another picture, this one clearer. He documented the time. Then he drove home and began to cook. He made her favorite meal, shrimp and grits, the way his grandmother used to make it. He used expensive Gruyere cheese and simmered the grits for an hour until they were creamy and perfect. He sautéed the shrimp with garlic, andouille sausage, and peppers. The smell filled their small house, a smell that had always meant comfort and home. It felt like a betrayal to create it now. She walked in at 9:52 p.m., looking flushed and happy. She stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, Kenny, you made grits? Thought you might be hungry after a long day," he said, his voice even. He kept his back to her, stirring the shrimp. "I'm starving," she said, dropping her $2,400 Burberry briefcase on the counter. "The team and I just had a major breakthrough on the lighting design for the hotel lobby. We were there for hours, just sketching and arguing. I'm so fried." He turned to face her, forcing a smile. "Well, sit down. Let me fix you a plate." As she ate, she talked animatedly about sconces and ambient lighting and color palettes. It was a masterful performance, full of specific details and convincing passion. He listened, nodding, asking simple questions. "So, the developers liked the new sketches? Was your boss there with you?" Each question was a small test, a pebble dropped into the deep, still water of her deception. She answered everyone without hesitation. He watched her eat the food he had cooked with his own hands, the hands she found so quaint, and he felt nothing but a vast, icy calm. He was gathering evidence, and her every word was a confession. The third Friday, he followed the script again. This time he parked in a garage across the street, giving him an elevated view. 6:48 p.m. The Lexus, the man, Tessa. This time, as they got out, he zoomed in on the man's face. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with a handsome, weathered face and a look of easy authority. He was probably the developer she was supposedly battling with. Kendrick took a series of sharp, clear photos. He now had a face. That night, he didn't cook. He ordered a pizza, a cheap $15 pepperoni from a local place. When she came home at 10:11 p.m., she looked annoyed. "Pizza? Really, Kenny?" "Yeah, I was tired," he said, not looking up from the TV. "I had the most stressful day. I was hoping for real food," she complained, throwing her keys on the table. "My boss is being a complete nightmare, second-guessing every choice I make. I almost walked out." "That sounds tough," he said, his voice flat. He could hear the lie straining at the edges of her voice. She was getting sloppy, her excuses more dramatic and less detailed. He imagined her in a plush hotel room, laughing over a bottle of expensive champagne, coming up with this story on the car ride home. The thought didn't even hurt anymore. It was just data. The fourth and final Friday was different. He didn't feel any dread or sadness. He felt a quiet, grim purpose. He drove to his observation spot, took his final damning photograph at 6:47 p.m., and then he didn't go home. He drove to a small, quiet park by the bay and sat on a bench watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of orange and purple. The salt air felt clean in his lungs. He took out a small notebook and a pen. At the top of the page he wrote, "The plan." Underneath, he started making a list. Each item was a step toward his new life, a life without Tessa. He was no longer a victim. He was a strategist, and his campaign was about to begin. The 4 weeks of playing dumb were over. The next Friday, he would not be the one waiting in the dark. Have you ever had to pretend everything was okay when your world was falling apart? It takes a strength most people don't know they have. Kendrick found that strength, and he was about to use it. The storm was coming for Tessa, and she had no idea she was the one caught in its eye. On Monday morning, Kendrick called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. He told his supervisor he had a stomach bug, a lie that came easily now. His first appointment at 9 a.m. was with a lawyer. Her name was Sarah Jenkins, a name he'd gotten from a guy in his softball league whose cousin had gone through a nasty divorce. Her office was in a modest building on North 9th Avenue, far from the gleaming glass towers downtown where Tessa's firm was located. Sarah Jenkins was a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 40s, with a no-nonsense air that Kendrick immediately trusted. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. She offered a cup of coffee and got straight to the point. "So, what can I do for you, Mr. Miller?" Her fee was $450 an hour, a sum that made his eyes water, but he knew it was an investment in his future. Kendrick didn't stumble over his words. He laid out the story with the calm precision of a man detailing a faulty wiring diagram. He explained the Friday is mine rule. He explained his discovery. Then he placed his phone on her polished mahogany desk and slid it across. He had created a folder. It was labeled simply Evidence. Inside were the photos from each of the 4 Fridays, all time-stamped. There were screenshots of the credit card statements with the suspicious charges highlighted. There was a copy of the deed to his house, showing he was the sole original owner. And there was a printout of his personal savings account statement, an account Tessa knew nothing about. It was an emergency fund he had been contributing to since he was 20 years old. Started with a $500 check from his grandmother. It now held $40,750. Sarah Jenkins looked through everything, her expression unreadable. She swiped through the photos, her brow furrowed slightly. She studied the bank statements. When she was done, she looked up at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of empathy in her eyes. "She has no idea, does she?" "No," Kendrick said. "She thinks I'm a simple man. She thinks I don't pay attention." "That's a common and very expensive mistake for people to make," Sarah said, a grim smile touching her lips. "Okay, Mr. Miller. Here's what we're going to do. Florida is a no-fault state, which is good, but it's also an equitable distribution state. However, assets acquired before the marriage, if they've been kept separate, are generally considered non-marital property. This house," she tapped the deed, "and this savings account," she tapped the bank statement, "are your strongest assets. We are going to protect them." They spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. It was cold, methodical, and devastatingly effective. She called it a swift and total extraction. "The key," she explained, "is to act decisively and control the narrative. We file first. We serve her at a time and place of our choosing, and we secure your assets before she even knows what's happening." They decided on the following Friday, the 5th Friday. His next calls were to a moving company and a locksmith. He booked them both for Friday morning, paying the deposits with his secret savings account. The movers would arrive at 9 a.m., the locksmith at 11:30 a.m. The plan was timed to the minute. The rest of the week was a blur of forced normalcy. On Tuesday evening, Tessa came home excited. "Guess what? The developers loved my lighting proposal. They signed off on it." "That's fantastic, babe," Kendrick said, looking up from the TV. "I'm proud of you." The words felt like ashes in his mouth. On Wednesday, she complained about the cost of reframing some prints for a client. "It's almost $1,000. It's highway robbery." He nodded sympathetically, thinking of the $4,500 retainer he had just paid Sarah Jenkins. On Thursday night, she curled up next to him on the couch. "You've been quiet this week," she said, tracing a finger along his arm. "Everything okay?" He looked at her, at the woman he had promised to love and cherish, and felt a profound and final wave of grief. It was the death of the man he used to be, the trusting husband who would have done anything for her. That man was gone. In his place was someone else, someone she had created with her lies. "Just tired," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Long week?" "Well, tomorrow's Friday," she said brightly. "My big work night. Then the weekend's here." He looked into her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Tomorrow's Friday." She had no idea what was coming. She'd made a critical mistake. She underestimated the simple man she married. The fifth Friday began like any other. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. They moved around each other in the familiar choreography of a married couple. She showered first while he made coffee. He showered while she did her makeup. A ritual that involved an arsenal of expensive creams and powders that cost a small fortune. She came out of the bathroom dressed for work in a sharp navy blue dress that cost $850 and heels that made her tower over him. She grabbed her briefcase and her keys. "Okay, I'm off," she said, leaning in to kiss him. It was a quick, dry peck on the cheek. "Have a good day, don't work too late." "You too," Kendrick said, his voice utterly calm. "Crush it." The words hung in the air for a moment. He was using her language, the corporate jargon she loved. She smiled, pleased. "Always do." And then she was gone, the sound of the silver Lexus's engine fading down the street. The moment the car was out of earshot, Kendrick moved. The house, once a home, was now a staging ground. He didn't feel sadness, just a grim, focused energy. At exactly 8 a.m., he was standing in the lobby of the Escambia County Clerk of Courts. He walked up to the counter, his heart pounding a steady, resolute beat. He handed the petition for dissolution of marriage, prepared by Sarah's office, to the clerk. The woman stamped the documents with a heavy, final-sounding thud. It was done. The legal mechanism was in motion. He was back at the house by 8:45 a.m. At precisely 9 a.m., a large moving truck from a company called Two Strong Men and a Truck pulled into his driveway. Two young, muscular men hopped out, their faces cheerful and professional. Kendrick met them at the door with a list. "Morning," he said. "We need to be fast and careful. We're only taking specific things." For the next 2.5 hours, he directed them with the quiet authority of a foreman on a job site. They packed his clothes, his books, his father's old tools. They carefully wrapped the framed photos of his family, leaving the ones of him and Tessa on the walls. They took the worn sectional sofa he had paid for in cash before they were married. They took the old coffee table he'd refinished himself. They took the bedroom set from the guest room, which had been his before their wedding. They left her entire world untouched, the pristine white kitchen, her overflowing closet, the minimalist furniture in the living room that she had picked out and paid for with their joint account. The house began to look strange, hollowed out, like a movie set where half the props had been removed. By 11:30 a.m., the truck was loaded. He paid the movers $875 for the morning's work, and they pulled away, taking the tangible remnants of his old life to a secure storage unit he had rented. At 11:35 a.m., the locksmith's van arrived. A quiet, older man with practiced hands got to work. He removed the old locks from the front and back doors and installed new, high-security deadbolts. The sound of his drill echoed in the half-empty house, At 11:58 a.m., he handed Kendrick a set of new keys. "You're all set," he said. The cost was $320. Kendrick stood in the silent, echoing living room. He walked into their bedroom. Her side of the bed was still rumpled. Her expensive perfume hung in the air. He went to her jewelry box, a lacquered case he'd given her for their second anniversary. He took off his simple gold wedding band, a $350 ring he hadn't removed in 7 years, and placed it squarely in the center of the lid. Then he walked out of the bedroom, through the living room, and out the front door for the last time as Tessa's husband. He locked the new deadbolt. The solid click was the most satisfying sound he had ever heard. It was exactly noon. He had vanished from her life. Her return was a scene he would only ever play in his mind, but Sarah's process server, a man named Dave, would describe it to him later. Tessa arrived home at 8:17 p.m., looking tired but pleased with herself after another successful late shift. She walked up to the front door, humming, and put her key in the lock. It didn't turn. She frowned, jiggling it. Nothing. Annoyed, she tried again. Still nothing. Confusion turned to irritation. She knocked on the door. "Kenny? Did you bolt the door? I can't get my key to work." Silence. She peered through the front window. In the dim light from the street, she could see the living room. The sofa was gone. The coffee table was gone. The lamp in the corner was gone. Panic began to claw its way up her throat. She ran to the back door, fumbling with her keys. That lock, too, had been changed. It was at that moment, as she stood in her own backyard, her mind reeling, that Dave, the process server, stepped out from the side of the house. "Tessa Miller?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. She spun around, startled. "Yes? Who are you?" "You've been served," he said, handing her a thick manila envelope. And as she took it, her manicured hands trembling, she finally understood. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a prank. This was a reckoning. Kendrick wasn't there, and he was never coming back. The collapse of Tessa's carefully constructed world was not a single explosion, but a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of her own choices. Kendrick experienced it through a series of voicemails and texts that began that Friday night and devolved over the weekend. The first message arrived on his phone at 8:25 p.m., just as he was checking into a clean, anonymous 120-a-night hotel room. It was a text. "Kenny, what is going on? My key isn't working. Call me now." It was demanding, annoyed. The second came at 8:40 p.m., a frantic voicemail. "Kendrick, this isn't funny. Where are you? And where is our couch? I'm locked out of my own house. Call me back this instant. I am not playing games." Her voice was sharp, angry, laced with the arrogance of someone who had never faced a single consequence. He didn't reply. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed and listened to the silence. At 9:15 p.m., another text. This one was different. "I have the papers. What is this? Divorce? Is this some kind of joke?" The anger was giving way to disbelief. He received 10 more calls that night, each going straight to the voicemail he had set up. He didn't listen to them until the next morning, sitting in a small diner with a cup of black coffee. He played them one by one. Her voice progressed through the stages of a complete breakdown. Voicemail 1, 9:45 p.m. Pleading, "Kenny, baby, please. Whatever you think is going on, you're wrong. We can talk about this. Just call me, please. I'm scared." Voicemail 2, 10:30 p.m. Sobbing. "I can't believe you would do this to me, to us. After everything. I love you. How could you just disappear? Where did you even go?" Voicemail 3, 11:50 p.m. Ice-cold rage. "You think you can just throw me out? The house is half mine, Kendrick. You will regret this. I will take you for everything you have. You hear me? Everything." He saved that one. Sarah would love it. The legal downfall was swift and brutal. On Monday morning, Sarah Jenkins filed an emergency motion to grant Kendrick exclusive use of the marital home, citing his sole ownership prior to the marriage and Tessa's effective abandonment of the property, evidenced by her weekly rendezvous. The judge granted it. Tessa, who had spent the weekend at a friend's house, was legally barred from returning. The process server delivered the news of her official eviction from the house, along with a summons, to her at her office, in front of her colleagues. The hushed whispers, the pitying looks from her boss, her carefully curated professional image was shattered in an instant. The financial consequences were even more severe. Her lawyer, a high-priced shark from a downtown firm, was stunned to learn about Kendrick's separate, premarital savings. The $42,750 was untouchable. The house, because he had owned it outright before their marriage and had never added her name to the deed, was deemed his non-marital property. She was entitled to half the value it had appreciated during their marriage, which amounted to about $30,000, but that was offset by her share of the marital debt she had racked up on their joint credit cards, over $25,000 in clothes, dinners, and luxury goods. Her world, financed by his stability, crumbled. The $650 monthly payment on her silver Lexus was suddenly an impossible burden. Within 2 months, the $52,000 car was repossessed. She was forced to move into a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town, with a rent of $300 a month that consumed most of her take-home pay. The final, most satisfying piece of the cascade came from an unexpected source. The man from the hotel, a wealthy real estate developer named Arthur Vance, was also married. His wife, a formidable woman with her own money and an even better lawyer than Sarah Jenkins, was named in the divorce proceedings. Sarah had made sure of it. Arthur's life imploded. His wife filed for divorce. His business partners were furious about the scandal, and he cut off all contact with Tessa, wanting nothing to do with the mess she had brought to his door. She was left completely and utterly alone, a designer with expensive tastes and no one left to foot the bill. She had traded a loving husband and a stable home for a few hours of luxury a week, and in the end, she lost it all. 6 months later, the Florida sun felt different. It felt warmer, cleaner. Kendrick sat on the front porch of his house, with a glass of iced tea. The late afternoon light filtered through the leaves of the big oak tree in his yard, dappling the lawn. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming gardenias from the bushes he had planted along the fence. The house was no longer half empty. It felt whole again, filled not with expensive furniture, but with peace. He had rented out the 2 spare bedrooms. One was to Marcus, a promising 20-year-old kid from his HVAC company that he was mentoring. Marcus was a hard worker, respectful and eager to learn the trade. He reminded Kendrick of himself at that age. His $500 a month in rent was a nice supplement to Kendrick's income. But the real value was the quiet companionship, the easy talk of pressure gauges and condenser coils over dinner. The other room was rented to a traveling nurse, a quiet woman who was rarely there. The living room now held a simple, sturdy sofa he'd bought from a second-hand store for $400. The walls were decorated with photos of his parents, his sister and her kids, and his softball team. They were a motley crew of plumbers, electricians, and mechanics called the Brent Bombers. They weren't very good, but they played hard every Saturday and drank cheap beer afterward, celebrating a good double play or bemoaning a strikeout. It was a community real and unpretentious. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Game's at 5. Don't forget to bring the Gatorade." Kendrick smiled. He texted back, "On it." He took a sip of his tea and looked out at the street. His life was simpler now. His finances were stable. His work was satisfying. He had his house, his friends, his self-respect. He had learned the hardest lesson of his life, that true wealth had nothing to do with the price tag on a car or a dress. It was about the foundation. A foundation built on honesty, hard work, and the quiet loyalty of people who saw you for who you were, not for what you could provide. Tessa had been obsessed with aesthetics, with the appearance of success. She had built a beautiful, hollow facade. He, on the other hand, had focused on the wiring, the plumbing, the foundation. And when the storm came, her facade had been blown away, leaving her with nothing. His foundation had held. He thought of Tessa sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a distant, clinical pity. He'd heard through the grapevine that she was struggling, that she had to take a second job on weekends waiting tables. He hoped she would be okay. He hoped, for her own sake, that she would one day learn the difference between price and value. He had forgiven her, not for her, but for himself. Forgiveness was the final step in clearing out the wreckage and making space for something new to grow. He finished his tea, stood up, and stretched. The sun was getting lower in the sky, casting long shadows across his lawn. It was time to get ready for the game. He went inside, grabbing his worn baseball glove from the hook by the door. It was a simple object, a $60 piece of leather he'd had for years, but it felt more valuable to him now than any luxury car. It was a symbol of his new life, a life that was solid, real, and entirely his own. True character isn't revealed when things are easy. It's forged in the fire of betrayal and loss. You learn what you're made of when you have to rebuild from the ground up. What part of Kendrick's journey reminds you of your own strength? Let us know in the comments below, and thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride.